Hi everybody, I'm Simon from VIEZU Technologies, and today's training video is the Magic Flex Bench Mode. Okay, so this is the Magic Motorsport Flex tool. We're connecting to an ECU in bench mode, as you can see here on the table, and we're going to be taking you through the software as well. This is a web-based software, so it's browser-based, so it's a little bit different to some things you may have seen before. If you use traditional tools like Alien Tech Cares and K-Tagged on the market, any sort of dim sport tools or CMD, for example, you'll be used to a program running on the computer. Magic's a little bit different, but we'll take you through step by step, show you the piece of equipment you need, show you some little tips and tricks along the way to make life a little bit easier, make connections to those ECUs a little bit easier and more secure as well when you're connecting to those fiddly little pins on the connectors. So if you join me now, we're going to go to the software and we're going to take you through step by step. So you'll notice the software, as I've already mentioned, is browser based. So once you've double clicked on the shortcut on your desktop, you may have had it on your taskbar or even just in the program menu list, you've gone and found the Flex. Once you've opened it up, obviously first time it may ask you to log in, sign in with your user ID and password. You'll be greeted with this homepage screen. Okay, kind of makes sense. First screen you're going to see is the homepage. A little note on there is whenever you're looking at the software, the last thing you had opened, so the last screen you were on if you were reading and writing to an ECU, you close the browser, you open it back up, connecting back to the Flex tool again, of course, the Flex icon on your computer, it will take you back to that last screen you were on. Okay. We can see on the right hand side here, we're on the up-to-date version, so the latest version. It does a quick check before you do anything with the software. It does a quick check when you first open it up, looking for any updates. It says synchronizing or syncing in the corner. Okay, so that's looking for any new software updates, whether it's for OBD, bench or boot, it's doing that quick check. On here we've got the vehicle list, so we can do a quick browse to see what vehicles are available at the moment. There may have been a new vehicle added. You just want to see, did you see that notification right? Was that new vehicle you're looking for on the newsletter? It was? Great. It's on the list. Away you go, you can start tuning it. You've also got quick access to the help desk here, so no more sort of typing in the long convoluted web address for it. Double click your Flex icon, open the program up, and you can shortcut to the help desk there for any support ticket queries or questions that you need help with. Gives you some basic information across the bottom of the screen there as well, so we can see last firmware update, the current firmware version it's on. Remember, software updates don't necessarily mean the firmware inside has been updated. So software update has added new vehicles on there, tweaked protocols and things. A firmware update is a bit like the BIOS on your computer. It's updating the core sort of structure of the program inside there. So they won't always update simultaneously both things at the same time. So don't panic if you see your firmware date is a little bit older than today's current date when you last did an update on the software. So we've got the update option there on the right hand side, and we've got change log as well, so we can see any changes that we've done. A bit like looking at the news on the software, we can see what's been updated. On the left hand side you'll notice you've got three icons that are in green. These obviously can be greyed out as well. They're giving you a quick connectivity check on the system. We have USB at the top, we've got an internet connection as well, so it knows you've got an internet connection. Whilst the browser might be open, it doesn't mean you've got internet connection throughout, so if the internet drops, you'll notice that one of the icons obviously disappears off the screen just to show you that it's gone grey now, you've got no connection left. And you see you've got the connectivity box on there as well, so that's showing that you're synced up, our USB cable is connected to our Flex tools. Okay. Moving further down the screen we can see the little icon for the home page. Well, that's what we're already on at the moment. Next one down takes us into our Find ECU. So left click on there for a second. So you can see on the Select ECU page. There's a few options to this for the layout, and you can change it to your own preference. We've got on the right hand side, we've got Basic, Standard and Advanced. It might be sometimes Advanced is more useful for what you're looking for. You're looking for a specific ECU, or you just want the manufacturer and then want to look through the ECU list. So for example, we'll go to our bath, and then you can see straight away we're just greeted with the ECU types. Going back to the Basic option, if we go on our bath, we then get to choose Model, Engine and Control Unit. And Standard gives us more that traditional sort of drop-down box feel, that sort of menu item where we can go and choose what we're looking for. Very similar to the Basic on there, just a slightly different layout to it. You've also got at the top of the screen, let's just click back on Standard to take us back, close the bath off. We've got Global Search. So we could, for example, going on to Basic just to show here, we could go in the search box above our brands and we could type in this case, we're going to go with Peugeot because it's a Peugeot ECU that we're working on. So I can shortlist for Peugeot. Same with the model. I can scroll down the list, or I can type in the first few letters of the model I'm looking for, and it's going to shortlist them for me. Now in this case, it's a 2016 Peugeot Partner 1.6 HDI that I'm looking for. So I match the vehicle up with the listing that's here. I have 2008 to 2018, but we know in 2015/2016 the ECU changed from the older EDC17 C10 to the next generation, which is the EDC17 C60. And we can confirm that because that's on the actual label of the ECU. Press partner, we've got blue HDI there. So we can see it says Bosch EDC17 C60 on the right hand side of the screen. It's given us the options for OBD, bench and boot on there. But just to confirm that's the right ECU, we can lift this over and we can see on the label on the ECU we've actually got EDC17 C60 down there on the sticker. So it makes it nice and clear for us to know what we're working on. Let's put that back down there. Now we're not going through to the connections just yet. A little bit of a sneaky peek of how we go and find the vehicle at this point as we're going through the options in the software. So the next thing we're going to do is come down to our settings. And as you've already seen, we've got the option for basic, standard and advanced. If you don't see them in there, just jump into here and you can choose your preference, choose the one that you're looking for. You can enable them and disable them. So the standard view I tend to use is actually the basic one. It's not you're getting a special advanced feature and you're getting extra ECUs and menus. It's a different way of filtering the information. Okay? If you're used to one software that works in a certain way, pick the one that's closest to that. If you're used to an auto tuner, pick the one that's closest to that option. If you use CARES or CMD or DIM Sport, pick the option that's closest to the one that you're familiar with or most comfortable with. You're not missing out on any information, it just organises it in a slightly different way. You can choose the language, of course, so we can change the language option on here, and the font size. So if you're using a particularly big monitor, for example, the text might come up quite small, you can make it a little bit bigger. Again, using a small monitor, the text might be too big on there, you might want to shrink it slightly to sort of keep it in line with the rest of the device. We've then got Test Flex, so you can actually test the device itself. So it's quite a cool function in there that I haven't really seen on any other tuning tools out there in the market. You can run almost like a self-diagnostics on the tool. Now normally if you've got something that's failed to communicate or failed to read or write, you're straight into sending log files to the tool manufacturer. Well here you can do a quick sort of self-check first, make sure that the tool itself is working, you haven't got a break in the connection between the two pieces of hardware, the USB is in properly, the power lead, etc, etc. Obviously the USB's got to be in because you won't be able to do a quick test if it's not connected to the tool. But you kind of get the idea, you can check those various connections. So quite a cool feature to have on there. You've also got export logs. We're not going to do that at this point, but this is how you can export the log files to send to Magic Motorsport to their help desk to say, look, I've had a problem, I can't read this ECU, can you please take a look at the logs and see if you can find anything wrong? And it's usually down to, unfortunately, a bad connection somewhere. You haven't quite got that pin on correctly or something's just become separated. It wasn't quite into the slot on the tool itself. The power may be a bit low or even worse, you didn't put the power in. Whatever it is, the logs should show the information to them so they can go through and they can check that for you. You've also then got news and you've got a link then again to the Flex site itself, to Magic Motorsport's site, so you can see the help desk. So you've got it on the main homepage and you've got a quick link on the left hand side. So everything you need is sort of quite easy to sort of navigate to. It's all sort of there, labelled down the size. It's quite a nice condensed, simple sort of menu to go through on there. To read our vehicle, we're going to go into Select Vehicle. We're going to follow those steps through that we followed before to locate our ECU in question that we're going to do today. We can also use the last used feature, because remember we've already looked through this one a few minutes ago as I was taking you through the menus. So I can press last used, so you can see the vehicle, as we found from the listing, is already in there. Now this isn't related to whether you did it OBD, bench or boot, this is based on the vehicle listing itself. So that model of vehicle, that ECU type, regardless of the connection method, is one you've previously looked at and tried to do something with on the tool. Stores a number of the vehicles in there that you've previously looked at, so it's really, really helpful. You may be tuning a car, you may be doing it OBD, you've taken the read, you've gone away to tune it, customer gets a phone call, they've got to go off, they've got to pick up the kids from school, or there's an appointment they're late for, whatever it is, customer comes back later on that day, or maybe the next day, you can quickly bring up the vehicle in your list. You're not sort of scratching your head going, oh, which version of Peugeot was it again? It took me 20 minutes to find it last time. It's there in the list, so it's a really, really cool feature to have. We're going to utilise that now. And just by left clicking on it once, it takes us back to the Select Vehicle screen basically pre-filling in all of those options we selected before. So we can see it's got Peugeot, it's got partner, it's got the blue HDI, and it's shown us that EDC17 C60 on the side, which we've already confirmed on the label of the ECU is the correct one that we're looking for. Gives us three options. We've got OBD. Well, there's no car here. We've just got the ECU, so we can't do OBD. We've got bench and boot. Well, the training video today is for bench. That's the nice method when you connect into an ECU where you don't have to take the lid off. There's no taking screws out and trying to separate that lid from the silicone seal around there and getting covered in silicone, trying to reseal it back up. It's nice, quick and easy, and sort of clean to do as well. So that's the option we're going to select. You already get your first warning message here as well. This is where the software is saying, look, you're about to connect to an ECU, make sure you follow the connection instructions properly before you do anything else. The reason it tells you here is because the instructions aren't available on this screen. It's almost giving you a pre-warning. When we go to the next screen, we have got the option to just hit connect straight away to the ECU. Check the instructions first, make sure you've connected correctly. We're going to press next. Also notice on the bottom there it says an internet connection is required throughout the process. That is really important. Things like checksum corrections, RSA keys, all that sort of stuff is done online. I mean, the software is a web-based program anyway. It's running through a browser. So it's really, really paramount that you keep a good, stable internet connection throughout the whole process. Now, on this screen, while the temptation is to go hit the connect button, well, at this point, we haven't actually connected the ECU. In the real world, you've not connected the ECU yet. You haven't seen the instructions. You might have a pretty good memory and remember one you did a few weeks back or maybe a few months ago. Brilliant. Check the instructions anyway. You cannot guarantee that you remember exactly every single pinout on all the ECUs you've done. Check the manuals, check the connections you need to use. So before we press the connect button down here, we're always going to go to the manuals. And the beauty of it being an online system means that if any updates are done to the manuals, updates to protocols or new ECUs come out, there may be another method where they don't need as many pins on there. Or there could be a new security in the ECU where it needs an extra pin connecting. The manual's live updated. There's no worry about you running a piece of software on your computer that you forgot to update in 6 months. The manual is live. It's open directly from the server. We open the connector manual and we've got a really simplistic set of instructions on the screen. We can see both connectors. We've got the ECU laid out as you can see it on the screen there. So the connectors on the screen with the pinouts that are required. We've already got this one pre-configured here, but we'll show you the connections in a second, how you make those connections to the ECU. If you're unsure, and this one is a little bit harder to see, which is why I'm going to highlight it, everything's color-coded. Every bit of information on here, as I move the mouse across the screen, I'm just going to highlight this one here. This one's a little bit harder to see because it's actually a white cable that's needed. So obviously a white cable on a white background, it's not going to be the clearest sort of filling into the box there to see it's highlighted, unlike the red ones and the blue and the yellows obviously stand out. So just looking for that bold highlight around the pin. If I hover over it, it tells me the device I need, Flex 1.9, so that's this box here, plugged into our main Flex tool. It tells me the port that I need for connection, so it's telling me, again, looking at this, I need port B, so outlet B. It's telling me the pin number on the ECU. It's also telling me the port number, so we can see the white one is going into port 8. So B8, white cable, onto pin 82 on the ECU. And that's the same process for all of the pinouts. Hover over any of the ones that we need, and it tells you on there which ports. This power cable, for example, goes to port A, and it's into pin number 2. So we can see where we connect to. So port A number 1, and we're on to pin 2 on the ECU. Always pay attention to what's there because of the temptation. I'm going to highlight this one here, this little red one down to the side. We actually have 3 power cables on this one. 2 main ones onto 2 quite chunky pins, and then a slightly smaller one onto that sort of normal ECU connector pin. This one here, whilst it is red in colour, doesn't connect to number 3 on port A. It's not always a case of matching the colours up. Okay, this one needs to go into number 4. It tells us on the instructions, port A, port number 4. Okay, so don't just get carried away going, oh, yellow to yellow, blue to blue, green to green. It doesn't always work like that. I mean, the white cable is a prime example. It's going to a sort of purpley coloured number, purpley coloured sort of dot above the 8. Okay, so it's not always just matching the colours to the right connectors on here, use the right colour cable because it makes connections a lot easier, but make sure you pay attention to which port and which pin out on that port it's telling you to use. They're all listed up on the right hand side as well, so we can see the ECU on here is saying block A, connector block A, that's the big one down here, pin 82. That goes to flex B8. Well, we've just been over that. Flex B8 is the white cable, so that means block number 2 on the ECU, pin 82. So we're happy we've got all those pinouts connected. So before we close the connection manual, it's important now that we take you through step by step how we connect those pins, which parts of the kit we use, and actually some little tips and tricks about different connectors we use that make your life a little bit easier than the instructions are actually showing in there. So watch this now as we go close in on the pins and make those connections. So now we're going to go through the actual connections. We're going to look at the cables, some of the fittings, some of the connectors that go on the end of the cables, how we connect them to the Flex 1.9 box, and how we connect them to our ECU. So first things first, you'll see on the table we've got laid out all of our cables. We've got 3 power, 2 earth, and we've got 4 for our communication. These could be CAN high and low, GPT1, GPT2. They're not labelled specifically their function, but they are colour coordinated with the instructions on the screen. So before you connect to the ECU, it's important to note, we're going to pick up this blue cable as an example. It's got a male end on both sides. Now that's great for the actual flex box because there's a little push down sort of spring loaded connector on there we need to put the male end into to clamp it into place. The problem is we can't put a male end of a connector onto a male pin on an ECU. It's not going to work. So what we need, one of our little adapters. So these come in the kit. You'll see on one end you've got like a little round hole, a female connector. The male end goes in to the female connector. What that gives us on the other end is our little spade connector, a little cover to go over the pin. So there's 2 or 3 different sizes in the box. You'll need to find the ones that are best for your ECU. They do come with little labels on them. So B tends to be sort of bigger connectors on there, not because it says B, but they are bigger connectors. And then we have some slightly smaller ones labelled C. There's D as well in there, and E and F. You'll find the ones that suit best. We find the best combination is B for the larger connectors. So in this case where you're connecting to, you'll see them on the top here, the bigger pins. So typically your power and your earth pins use those bigger connectors. And the smaller ones we're going to use the C for, where we need to connect to our smaller ECU pins, like our communication pins, our CAN high and low typically. So now it's just a case of making sure we've got the right connectors on the right pins, and put this B, as it's a big one, back onto our ground. And we're going to put this C back onto our blue connector. We're going to check our instructions. We're going to start with the left-hand block. No particular reason, just starting with the connector on the left, the bigger connector block. And we can see we've got port B and port number 8 for our white cable. So I've picked up the white cable. We've already got that connector on the end. This is actually a D, so the C's and the D's, very, very similar size of connector on the end for our little pins. We're going to take our flex box. We're going to look along our B connector block, and we're going to look for, on there, pin 8, so port number 8. So port B, I'm going to push down on number 8 on the little spring-loaded thing on top. Plug our cable in, release, and we can see it's actually in there quite tightly, so it's a nice secure fit. I don't recommend obviously you pick up the tool with the cables, but it's important we've got a nice secure fit on the cable. The rest of the process is simply going through and finding the rest of the cables and matching them up to the pins. So we've now got the brown cable, which is port B, number 7. So you can see here B, number 7, and we'll just connect this one in. We're going to repeat this process for the rest of the ports and pins that we need, and then we're going to move on to connecting to the ECU plugs themselves. So now we've got all of our plugins A and B connected, we now need to put the other end of the cable, now that we've connected our female connectors on the end, we need to put these onto the corresponding pins on our loom connector. So we're going to start with our white one. It's on the left hand side, that's how we started with our plug-in. So we're going to pick the white cable. We're going to bring our ECU up slightly so we can get some light into it. And we're going to look, that needs to be on the third row down, and it needs to be the third small pin in from the left hand side. So we're literally going 1, 2, 3, third row down, 1, 2, 3, third pin in from the left hand side, line it up and just gently push the connector on. If you start to feel a lot of resistance, stop, come back out, check that you've got the right connector on, check there's enough room in there for it to fit, and you are putting it on in the correct alignment. It can be quite easy with these, especially when they're close together, to just get them slightly misaligned and you're pushing between the gap between the pins. The last thing you want to do is bend a pin, so just be careful there. Our next one is going to be our brown cable. This needs to go onto our second connector block. It's pin 24. I'm not counting all of the pins across from the bottom corner or top corner from wherever 0 and 1 start from. I'm looking on the picture. This is my second row up, and it's the first pin along from the side, from the left hand side. So second row of pins up, first one along, and just connect. We'll continue this for the rest of them to get the ECU fully connected. So now we've got all of our pins connected, we're going to close the connection manual and move into the communication phase. So I'm going to close that in the top right hand corner, and we're going to come down here on the left hand side of the screen just by the connect button. Now you'll notice at the bottom of the screen we've got reading and writing for internal flash, we've got it for internal EEPROM, full backup, etc. Internal and external for the flash refers to where the data is stored. Is it inside the micro? Is it in a separate chip somewhere else? It's just sort of references for the ECU itself. What we're looking for is we've got a flash, an EEPROM and a backup. Flash is going to be where the tuning data is. The EEPROM is going to be things like sometimes mileage, chassis number can be in there sometimes, as well as many other places. Immobilizer data, those sort of things, quite a small file. The flash is going to be where all of our map information is, so our fuel, our boost, our torque, etc. And the backup, well, like any good backup, it's a backup of all of the data, so if it does go wrong somewhere, we have that file. Potentially we can put it into a donor ECU, or we can overwrite this one and restore it back to how it was, hence the backup as the name. So we'll notice at the bottom of the screen again, it's giving us that message saying make sure you've connected it correctly as per the instruction manual says, and also make sure you've got an internet connection throughout. Things like RSA key correction, checksum correction, all of these sort of online based processes it needs to do. Well, guess what? It needs to be online for that, so make sure your connection is good, uninterrupted. We're going to move up to connect, and we're going to left click, and as soon as we do that you'll hear like a little beep or click come from the device. I'll just show that. I don't recommend moving it whilst you are tuning in the field, but you'll notice the number of lights on the device itself. It's showing us where the colours are, where the pinouts are. It's highlighting all of those cables that were connected at the time, and you'll notice it's going through on the right hand side of the screen, it's doing its communication. So it's going through, it's checked internal EEPROM or EEPROM, it's checked the flash, and even just the short space of time I said about, you can see each of the little pinouts, little light goes on there. So if you've missed one of them and you see a light on let's say B11 and there's a light there, that's telling you probably should have had a pin in that one. Double check your instructions. Whilst it's not a guarantee on there, the power and earth are probably the most important ones to make sure you've got connected right. If you put power and earth down the wrong pins, there's a great risk of doing damage to the ECU. If you've got something like the CAN bus cables in the wrong way, the CAN high and low on the wrong pins, well, they're a pass-through for the data. They're not sending really power through there. They could still cause problems. I'm not saying a guarantee if you've got them on the wrong pins, you won't have any issues with the CAN high and low, but the really, really risky ones, of course, are the red and black, the ones that are sending power through. Worst case, hopefully, if you have missed something, you've just forgotten to put an extra cable on, not that you've connected it the wrong way round. So just keep a check on the lights that appear on the box. They'll give you an indication if you've got everything connected where it should be at least. and it took all of 8 seconds to do the reading on there. So it's gone through and it's done its sort of quick connection, checked everything in there, read the sort of the addresses of all the information. Is it readable? Is it writable? All that sort of stuff that we need. The next step for us, because all that's done is an initial communication, a quick handshake, we need to read the backup. The temptation is to go straight to what we want, make life nice and easy, go and get the flash file. That's what we're going to tune. That's what we're going to make modifications to. I'll just grab that, make the tune, throw it back into the ECU. Great, you've saved yourself some time, but the problem is it's high risk for a small reward of saving yourself a couple of minutes of time. Take the backup first. There's nothing wrong with taking the backup. Better safe than sorry when working on an ECU. I'm going to press full backup, and immediately it's going straight into the reading phase. It's not asking us to do anything else. We can see we've got the lights on the box. Now at this point, I'm definitely not going to pick this up to show those lights, but we can see we've got our power light on, we've got our communication light on, all of our little pins. So in connector block B, we've got 5, 6, 7 and 8. All the little lights on there to show that look, these ones are now going to be communicating. And on the screen, you can see it's reading through the internal flash. This part is going to be a little bit longer than the EEPROM because it's a bigger file. But we'll let this go through, we'll see it go through the EEPROM, and then it will bring us to a save screen where we can save this file. So it's just read the ECU. It's taken the backup on there. It's read the internal flash and the EEPROM, stored them together as the backup. You see, it's quite a quick process. We've now greeted with 3 options: save backup only, save all, or cancel. Well, I definitely don't want to cancel. I could just press save backup only, and it's going to save the backup file, but that kind of defeats the purpose of what it's just done. It's just read everything from the ECU. It's just read the internal flash and the EEPROM. So why would I want to save all of them? Save the backup, the flash, and the EEPROM. I don't want to double up on the work, saving the backup only, going into the internal flash and then taking a read of that. Let's press save all. I'm going to save them onto our desktop, and we've got the name at the bottom. It's going to basically create a zip folder with everything in, just saving us a bit of time on there. We can change the name if we want to. It's given it a file hash on there, so that hash is basically almost like a unique identifier of every byte of data on there, a bit like a serial number if you like. I always recommend whenever you're saving anything from an ECU or from a vehicle, save it with something that is relevant to that vehicle for yourself. VIN number is the best, obviously 17 characters. Not everyone's going to provide you that. If you get an ECU shipped to the post, you might not have got a VIN number. Might back down in the workshop. Registration number, license plate, more than enough in most cases. Put it in there as something that's useful for yourself so you can recognise clearly that file belongs to that vehicle. In this case, we're going to leave it as the default naming that's come up on there, as we're just using this as a training example. We're going to press save, and we can see on the bottom of the screen, it's just downloading it as you would sort of most files you download a document or a picture from the internet. It's just giving us that sort of normal download screen. This is supported, by the way, in Chrome, in Firefox and Explorer or Edge, whichever sort of main browser you're using. If you are concerned about a very specific or niche browser that you're using, just contact Magic Motorsport or ourselves at VIEZU and we can confirm that for you if it's supported. So now we've got all the information. Let's go and look at the file. So we're going to go to our desktop. We're going to extract the data by right-clicking because we've got WinRAR or WinZip on the computer. We're going to extract it to its own folder. Move that to the side because it's quite a long name. We're just going to open it up and we can see inside we've got a text document and we've got a dump of the data. Crazy huge name on there, and we can see we have bin file with 1 kilobyte. We've got an internal flash of 4,096 kilobytes, 4 megabytes basically. We've got the EEPROM and we've got the full backup. So through one easy simple action, it's taken all of that data for us. Let's close this. Now at this point you then go and make the tuning file. So if you're a master, you're going to go make the tuning file. You might send it off to a company such as ourselves at VIEZU. The tech support guys will make the tuning file based on your requirements and requests. If you've got a slave tool or client tool, of course, you then send it through to ourselves at VIEZU. And again, The tech support guy is going to jump straight onto it, get that file back to you in about 20 minutes with all the requirements and modifications that you wanted on the file. Once you've got it back, you're ready to go back onto the software, because remember, you may have closed it, you may have gone and done other jobs in the meantime, the car may have been taken for a service or an MOT, or you've fitted an exhaust, operated turbo to it in the meantime, whatever it is. Basically repeating the steps. ECU back out on the bench, open the software back up by double clicking on the flex or finding it in your program list, and going again the connection manual again. So let's go back through that now. So you've got the mod file back from the VIEZU Technical Support team, you've downloaded it to your computer, either desktop or the specific folder, or as a master you've finished making the modifications to the file and you're ready to write it back onto the ECU. You've been and got the ECU out of the vehicle, if work has been carried on the vehicle in the meantime, maybe it was dyno testing, doing the original run, whatever it may be. It may just be still on your bench, ready to communicate back to. However, open the software back up, double click on the flex icon or find it in your program list to get the browser back open. Always double check your connection. So let's go through that live now. We are going to double click on our flex icon on the desktop. Just take a moment while it's just opening up the browser now, linking to the server. And once it's open, you'll notice it's going to take you back to the last page you're on. Won't do it every time. I mean, an update to their server, it's resunk, it's the next day, for example. But in this case, as you've just seen it there on the screen, it's taken us back to the last thing we were looking at. If it takes you back to the home screen, I'm going to do this now live for you. Back to the home page. Let's click on Find ECU. We're going to go up to the top. It might be down at the bottom, depending if you're looking at basic or advanced or standard. Last ECU. Left click on it, and exactly the same way we found the vehicle in the first place. It's got our listing, bench, little warning message again. Make sure you're online. Connections are correct. And we're connected again. Okay, we're back onto this screen. We're back to where we needed to go to. Check your manuals. If you've disconnected from the ECU, and even if you haven't, if you've left the ECU unattended, it may even just be knocked on the desk. You've moved something, gone to grab a coffee. Try not to keep liquids near electrical equipment, of course. It's not best for the ECU if it gets wet. Whilst it is sealed here, it's just not a good idea around computers and electrical components. But the cable may have been knocked, may have been disturbed. Double check your connections. Make sure they're on the right pinouts. Okay? You're happy with your connections? Close the connection screen. And before we get to the writing option, we've got to press connect again. Hear a little beep come from the tool itself. The lights are lit back up for, again, the connections, the ports on B where we've got 5, 6, 7 and 8 on there. On A we've got 1, 2 and 4. And of course the negatives 5 and 6, they're all lit up, showing that we've got communication, information's going out of there. Again, exactly as before. We've never closed the browser. It's later on in the day. We've done tuning and other things in the meantime. Exactly 8 seconds to communicate again. So it's a really, really consistent, reliable tool in that regard. Now the temptation might be to reverse the actions you did when you were reading it. When we read it, we took a full backup and then pressed save all. So I need to write the full backup. No, you don't write the full backup. What we're going to do from a tuning point of view is we're going to write the internal flash, because on this ECU, that's where the data is that we need to program back in. That's where our fuel, our boost, our torque and everything else is that we need to put back into the ECU that we've modified, we've tweaked and adjusted. If we go into full backup, well, we haven't got a modified full backup in this case. As this is obviously the master setup on here, we've got the option to go in and write specific parts that we need to. Now, it's an important thing to note, if you're using a slave or client tool, you're only really greeted with the full backup. You're only really greeted with full backup for reading and for writing on some tools. So it's important not to panic at that point. You're just going to repeat the steps you did before. So as a slave, you're going to take one file off, put that file back on. That's because that file is encrypted. Your master, such as VIEZU, is going to decrypt that file, take the bits out we need for tuning, and then package it all back up, sending one big file back over to you. In a similar way, if you use tools like KTAG or CMD or TransData for bench tuning, very similar to that. Most tuning tools work in a similar sort of way for these ECUs. At the end of the day, the ECU is consistent, so it makes sense that tuning tools are fairly consistent in how they work as well. In this case, though, the file was in the internal flash. So from a writing point of view, we want the internal flash. Click on there, load the file, CU, into the control unit. That doesn't make sense because that wasn't what it said on the screen. Load the file with the CU control unit content or information into the ECU. It's basically saying, hey, just are you sure you're about to do this? Are you sure you want to do it? You're about to load a file into the ECU. Well, yes, I'd like to upload, please. And it's going to give me a browse box. So what we're going to do is, on our desktop, we're going to go back into that folder we created before. So now we're in our folder. I saved it back into that same location we stored the original data. We always try and keep all of the file information together, so an original file and a mod file will always store in the same folder. It is quite risky when you start to have originals for a customer in one place and the mod files in another place. Tying the two together after a week, a few months or a year can actually be quite hard. So if you need to go back to it and add more stuff, it's gone to stage 2, stage 3, you're trying to pull apart these files and you've got no idea which one belongs to which. You didn't put a VIN number in or a license number, so you've just got 100 things saying Peugeot partner, Oris and mods. You're having to start the whole process over again. So keep the files that belong to that vehicle in the same folder. So we can see now we've got the PSA Bosch EDC17 C60. It's our bench flash. We've got the VPerf there. That's the VIEZU performance file. So we need to put that into the ECU. Notice it's .bin, it's the same size as our original. We're going to press OK. And it's now loading that file into almost like a buffer, getting ready, sort of preloading it, ready to put into the ECU. This gives us another chance to double check what we're doing and go, am I sure I've got the right file? If this says my Christmas wish list in there, that's not what I want to be putting into the ECU, so I've got the option now to press change file. I can go back in and go, whoops, pick the wrong thing, better go and change it. Okay? Always double check you've got the right data to go back in. In this case we're going to press upload. As soon as we press upload, we can see it's starting to connect to the ECU and it's going to start making all those sort of checksum corrections and everything else on the screen as it starts to then write through to the ECU. And just like that, it's completed. It took a grand total of 2 minutes and 14 seconds to write back the internal flash. That includes all the checksum corrections and everything else it needs to do to the ECU. We'll see in there that obviously some of the sectors, some of the sections or blocks of data inside the ECU, it was checking and going, well, this sector's the same as the file. Well, yeah, it makes sense. It's a 4 megabyte file. There's not 4 megabytes of changes in there. Every single byte of data is not modified in the ECU. In the grand scheme of things, you might have 25 to 30,000 maps in this particular ECU. There's only a handful, 50 to 100, that are going to be modified for any tuning requirement. There's more data in the ECU to just make the car run than there is the requirement of sort of the performance side or economy side or whatever functions you do into that ECU. So it's gone through, we've got write successful, and it's finished. That's it. The next step now is to disconnect from the ECU. Now you don't need to do this with the software, but it's advisable and just one of those OCD sort of things, and I said our top tips, disconnect power first from the tool as well as closing the browser. So what I'll do at this point is I'll actually close the Flex browser. What that's going to allow me to do is that peace of mind that I can't accidentally click on something, someone walking past can't accidentally click on the software and create the writing again or hit connection whilst I'm disconnecting pins. The very next thing I'm going to do is disconnect the power. Now I'm guaranteed I have no power from the power supply, no 12 volts going through to the ECU. There could be some residual from the USB cable, so the next thing I'm going to do is disconnect the USB. There is nothing left in this tool now that can power the ECU, that can risk booting the ECU up, enabling anything on there. So now I'm safe to come to my ECU and simply just disconnect very carefully. Recommend you looking at the pins when you're doing this. But for ease of the training video and the camera, you just go through and disconnect all of your pins on there. So ECU's done, nice, clean, ready to fit back to the car. Last little bit of housekeeping, of course, is tidy up your tool. So when you're finished, remember push on these little pins as we showed you in the section earlier about how to connect to the flex box. Just push on the little releases, undo all of the pins, put them back in your box. Okay, keep your cables nice and safe. As with any tools, the more you look after them, the more they're going to help you out and reward you in the future. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. And obviously check out our other training videos online as well. Thanks for watching, everybody.